Friday night at the yogurt shop, the evening of December 6th, 1991, in Austin, Texas, felt like countless others before it. A cool breeze drifted through the hill country air, carrying the faint scent of cedar and gasoline from cars lined up along North Lamar Boulevard. Downtown pulsed with the restless energy of a Friday night, college students spilling out of bars, families finishing Christmas shopping, and teenagers roaming strip malls in search of burgers, sodas, and weekend freedom. At the corner of one such strip sat a modest store with a cheery name. I can't believe it's yogurt. Its fluorescent lights glowed warm against the December darkness, a small beacon of suburban comfort. For most who passed, it was just another fast food stop, a place for after-school hangouts or late-night desserts. But for four girls inside that shop, it was the backdrop to their final night alive. Jennifer Harbison was 17, and in many ways the leader of the group. With long hair that framed her face and a steady confidence, she was the kind of girl classmates turned to when things needed organizing. Teachers remembered her as responsible and mature, balancing school, work, and dreams of one day becoming a veterinarian. She loved animals, so much so that she often spent weekends volunteering at clinics, feeding strays, and planning a future where she could dedicate her life to healing them. Jennifer's younger sister Sarah was 15. Where Jennifer was organized, Sarah was spirited. She had an easy laugh, the kind that rippled through a room and disarmed tension. Friends described her as bubbly, loyal, the kind of person who could turn mundane chores into moments of fun. She looked up to Jennifer, often following her lead, but she was carving out her own identity too, thinking about soccer, music, and the small freedoms of high school life. Alongside them that evening was Liza Thomas, another 17-year-old who had grown close to Jennifer through work at the yogurt shop. Eliza was grounded, pragmatic, and diligent. She wasn't the loudest in a crowd, but she had a quiet strength that made people feel safe around her. She was dependable, the type who never left a job half done. For Eliza, that yogurt shop shift was just another step toward earning spending money, gaining independence, and dreaming about the future after high school. The fourth girl was Amy Ayres, the youngest of the group at only 13. Amy didn't work at the shop. She was there that night because she loved tagging along with her older friends. Sweet, curious, and a little naive, Amy was the kind of kid sister figure who lit up at any invitation to hang out with teenagers. She adored animals like Jennifer, she doodled in notebooks, and she still carried the hopeful innocence of middle school. For Amy, being included in the group that night was exciting, like stepping into the world of grown-ups. If only for a few hours. 4 girls, 4 lives, each unique, each brimming with the promise of a future that would never arrive. To understand the world they lived in, one must picture Austin in the early 90s. It was a city on the cusp of transformation, known for its laid-back vibe, its music festivals, and the sprawling campus of the University of Texas. Austin was rapidly growing. Yet, compared to the booming metropolises of Houston or Dallas, it still retained the charm of a mid-sized town. The streets were dotted with mom-and-pop shops, strip malls, and the occasional fast food chain. The tech boom that would later define Austin as Silicon Hills was only just beginning. People still left their doors unlocked in some neighborhoods, and kids rode bikes until dusk without parents panicking. But beneath that atmosphere of trust was a shadow crime rates in Texas and across the country had been climbing through the late 80s and early 90s. Drugs, gang violence, and random acts of brutality had begun creeping into places that once felt untouched. Austin was no exception. Yet for 4 teenage girls working a yogurt shop shift, none of that seemed immediate. They were focused on their own small world. Customers, school gossip, the thrill of independence. That Friday night, the yogurt shop bustled with the usual traffic. Families stopped in after dinner, kids tugging at parents for an extra scoop of sprinkles. College students dropped by for late-night snacks. Laughter mixed with the mechanical hum of frozen yogurt machines. The girls served customers with polite smiles, rang up orders, and wiped tables in between. As the evening wore on, traffic slowed. One by one, customers trickled out until only a few remained. Outside, the parking lot grew quieter. The shopping center lights flickered, casting long shadows across rows of parked cars. Jennifer and Eliza managed the closing duties, wiping counters, counting the till, sweeping the tiled floor. Sarah and Amy lingered nearby, chatting, laughing, folding napkins into playful shapes. For them, closing the shop was more social than stressful. They had each other, and they had the security of routine. But routine can be deceiving. Sometime after midnight, an unease settled over the yogurt shop. Neighbors later recalled seeing people lingering in the parking lot, faces that seemed out of place. What exactly happened between closing time and the discovery of the fire remains partly speculation, but investigators pieced together enough to outline a grim narrative. The girls were not alone. At least 2 intruders entered the shop, demanding money, and what began as a robbery quickly spiraled into something darker. The victims were bound, gagged, and ultimately shot. Arson was used in a desperate attempt to erase the crime, flames consuming evidence, but not the truth. It is impossible to know the terror those 4 endured in those final minutes, the confusion, the pleading, the sudden shattering of teenage innocence. For Austin, the crime would become a wound that never fully healed. By dawn, North Lamar Boulevard was crowded with police cars, reporters, and onlookers. Parents clutched one another, teenagers whispered in disbelief, teachers braced for the Monday when classrooms would be filled with tears. The Harbison family, the Thomas family, the Ayers family, all were thrust into a nightmare that would stretch not for days or weeks, but for decades. Austin newspapers printed the girls' photos, smiling faces full of youth and promise. Vigils were held across the city. Candles flickered outside the yogurt shop, their wax pooling on the pavement like silent testimonies to lives cut short. The city's trust fractured. Parents grew more cautious. Teenagers, once carefree in their routines, now looked over shoulders, questioning the safety of ordinary places. The yogurt shop murders became more than just another headline. They became a wound carried by an entire community. What no one knew that weekend was just how complicated the search for justice would become. Investigators, desperate to bring peace to grieving families, would pursue leads that led to dead ends. Innocent men would be accused, tried, even convicted, only to have those convictions collapse. Years would pass. Technology would evolve. Families would hold on to fading hope. And all the while, the true killer's identity remained hidden, until decades later, science finally revealed the name that had eluded investigators for so long. But before we reach that revelation, we must linger here, in this moment, the night of December 6th, 1991. Because to understand the depth of what happened, we must first understand the girls themselves, their laughter, their dreams, their final shift at a neighborhood yogurt shop that became, overnight, the site of one of the most infamous Us Crimes in Texas History